The good old clap, take one.
That's right.
How many of you knew what you wanted to be when you were 7 years old? I did. I wanted to be a world champion.
Hey, is there honesty involved in this podcast? Can we be honest?
You can shut your lips.
And then I'll just say, put them up, what? Let's go.
He's like, you look too pretty on the wave. Get ugly.
We can talk about DMT if you want.
I thought you were boxing.
All right, we have a very special guest with us today, a U.S. national spearfishing champion, a certified culinary chef, an award-winning artist, a Yeti ambassador, an ocean conservation advocate, YouTube star, influencer, mom, wife, and overall badass, Kimi Werner. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you so much. That was quite the intro. Appreciate it.
So we're here in Southern California. It's raining, so it's pretty much the apocalypse for Southern Californians over here. Where are you at today, Kimi?
I am at my home on the North Shore of Oahu. I live in Waialua, and we pretty much have had one of the rainiest past 2 months or month and a half that I remember since being up here. But yeah, and it all took place during a renovation. We're renovating our kitchen, so
perfect.
We've been pretty much like cooking and living outside, and it's been stormy and soggy.
I actually had the pleasure of meeting you really briefly a few years ago through Jody Wilmot on the North Shore, and you joined us for a dinner when the ASP, I think it was like a board meeting. We all got there, and you were sharing a bit of your story there, and I thought, wow, that was really, really cool. And then when the opportunity to talk to you for the podcast came up, I was like, that sounds excellent. But it is really, really cool. You mentioned, in 2023, you guys are focused on the renovation, weather be damned. But what's kind of your week to week like? You have so many things going on. What does 2023 kind of look like for you so far in the first couple months?
I mean, yeah, the first couple of months, we really have just been investing all of our time into trying to make a kitchen and renovating our house. But I would say like most of my life on the day to day revolves around food inventory, which is just really like the driving force of my schedule and my life. And I think that's something that spearfishing really put into my life. Not only do I, go out and spear fish so that I can eat it during the week, but in the process of sharing fish with my community, it really developed this very strong, like-minded community of sharing. And so things are just always showing up on my doorstep, whether it's fish from other fishermen or, venison or sheep from hunters, or just mangoes or avocados from people who cherish their goods. We were given a big, fat, huge Samoan crab yesterday. And so as crazy as it sounds, like that is the driving force of my schedule, where I will actually cancel plans because there's fish that needs to be eaten while it's fresh in my fridge, and therefore dinners that need to be made. So that is not what my 2023 is about, but that's like what my day-to-day life is about. When it comes to this year, we have plans of filming in the Bahamas. I'm going to Costa Rica, and we're just hopping around and doing a lot of filming with spearfishing and cooking.
I love that little story about the community there on the North Shore, and probably Wailua specifically. It reminds me, I've got 9-year-old twins, but we've got this book, Too Many Mangoes, which I think is set in Hawaii, but it's about 2 kids and their grandparents, and they have a mango tree, and they've got so many of them. So they go door to door, and they trade the mangoes for, maybe some mango jam or maybe some bananas or whatever. And it makes so much sense, and it's so simple, and it's cool to hear that happens in real life still, instead of just kind of kids' books.
Totally. And I've seen that kids' book, and it's absolutely true, where I think they just had too many mangoes, so they go with their wagon, and their goal is to, give it away and get rid of it. But they end up coming home with a wagon with even more food than they set out with. And that is exactly how my life feels. And it's amazing. And I think because people know how much I value, the food that I harvest. I think that that then when they have beautiful harvests, that that's their gold. They trust in me that if they give it to me, it's not going to go to waste. And so I think I just take that so seriously, where it's more food than my family can possibly consume that seems to just show up at this door and come through this house. And so we're always just kind of this like outpost to the community of just like when people stop by, they know they're going to leave with fish or meat or produce or something. But I think it's a beautiful thing. It's something that I didn't have in my adult life, in my early 20s. And it really made me nostalgic about the way that I grew up and how everything just seemed so family oriented and community oriented, and such a connection to food and nature. And spearfishing, when I did take that up and did get serious about it, it's crazy that, it brought back, it's pretty much like what feels like to me like a modern day ahupua'a, and ahupua'a was a land division from mountain to ocean in ancient times. And basically, the people from the ocean would share their harvest with the people from the midlands or the people from the mountains. And that is how Hawaii and communities sustain themselves. And I always was fascinated by that idea as a kid, but it just seemed like something of ancient times and of the past. And now when I look at how this community is operating, when it comes to so many of my great friends, it makes me really proud to know that in our own way, we are doing exactly that.
Yeah, and it's interesting to hear you talk about that too, because I think humans have like this proclivity to like overcomplicate everything, whether it's like social media or like day-to-day like work-life balance, etc. But any opportunity that you have to kind of reconnect to really the essentials, where it's like, do I have a roof over my head? Do I got food in my belly? Like, are my kids safe? It's a very profound thing. And it makes me think of this little anecdote I read, reading an article about you on themeateater.com. And I know you said that food inventory is not necessarily your day-to-day, but it has been in 2023. But it does sound like the story from that article, where the first time you went out and spearfished for yourself, it was really profound because you're almost kind of tapping into that real visceral human experience, right? Where you're like, I'm going out and getting my own food. Is that fair?
Oh, absolutely. Like 100%. I grew up on Maui on the North Shore. And when I was really small, like 5 years old, I would tag along with my dad. And that's what he would do, is he would go spearfishing and free diving, to feed our family, like basically just to put food on the table, because my parents at the time didn't make much money. They were quite poor. And so that's how he fed us. But then by the time I was 7, both of my parents had really good careers that they worked really hard for. And our life changed so much, where we didn't really do that anymore. And we just got all of our food from grocery stores,
Right.
and, markets, and that's fine. But I think in growing into a more civilized life and pretty much, living that way all the way until adulthood, it really made me crave those olden days. It really made me realize just like how close to nature we lived, how much I enjoyed it. And it was something that that I truly longed for, but I didn't think I could get it back. I just thought, like, you're so lucky that you have those memories. You're so lucky that you had a childhood in such rural nature with 2 parents who like were feeding you so close and connected to nature, and you got to experience all of that. But it's just not something that, that exists anymore. But then later on, like when I was 24 years old and, grown adult, and just kind of I realized it one day when I went to, it was a canoe paddling regatta. I was a paddler, and these little fish hit the grill. And when I saw them, I just realized, like, oh, those are the fish I grew up with. Those aren't the kind that I'm working with in restaurants that are imported or that you see in grocery stores. Like, I know those fish. And those guys said that they got them from spearfishing. And it was then when I realized, like, I need to see about this. And that was the day that changed my life. I mean, the day that I just went out and tried it, you know. And at first I begged people to take me, and everybody said that they would, but nobody ended up calling. And finally, I'm just like, I have to take this into my own hands. I just have to try. So I just got a 3-prong spear. I came out here to the North Shore, and yeah, I just remember being so like intimidated and embarrassed. Like I didn't want to walk past anybody on the beach with a spear because I felt like everybody would look at me and know that I had no idea what I was doing. And when I got in the water, I was just as freaked out. But I just kept swimming, you know, and eventually I found a little reef, and after trial and error all day, I did spear about 5 fish, 5 little fish. And when I brought them in, it was like exactly what you said, like this primal sense of satisfaction of just like, I always just say that the woman that came out of the water that day was totally different than the one that entered, because I held my head high. I felt proud. I just felt like this lioness with my cat. And taking it home and knowing how to clean those fish and cook those fish, I just felt like that was the best day of my life. You know, I felt like I was returning to my roots, answering this calling, and most importantly, just like this self-sufficiency of being able to just go out with a spear and come home with dinner. Like that day changed everything for me, knowing that it's possible.
I love that story. And you know, listening to you talk a little bit about your upbringing, and I know we're going to go into it in the next segment, but I think it's important to talk about now too, because, you know, like humans kind of have this idea that like, you know, progress is just progress, but progress isn't necessarily a straight line. I always think like sometimes you like drive down a cul-de-sac and you're like, that's the wrong way. And I think about it so much these days with, you know, whatever, like Bitcoin or artificial intelligence. And it just feels like people are always like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? Without kind of pausing and going, well, like that part was really good, you know, and you were talking about, you know, your parents they got good jobs and, you know, we're moving into kind of a more civilized lifestyle, quote unquote, chasing the American dream or the capitalist dream or whatever. But I'm curious if you've ever talked to them about that transition and if they thought like, you know what, like part of that lifestyle we had before we did that was probably the right part. And maybe it was that connection, like one-to-one connection with your food, you know, or something like that, where of course you can go live somewhere that's got, you know, indoor plumbing or the internet or whatever, but like parts of life, you know, might be good to kind of hold on to.
Completely. And I mean, that's one thing about my mom and dad that I loved about them, is that whenever I looked at them, when it came to whatever stage of life they were in, whatever part of progress, you know, they were in when I was growing up, they always just made the best of it. And they always just seemed like a really, like they were always just a happy, strong partnership. And that's one thing I truly admired was, you know, as they did like get careers and like start making, you know, good money, like you know, for just like two blue collar workers growing up, you know, being on Maui, like
Sure.
they really worked from the bottom up. And my mom became a nurse in the emergency room after like going to college for the first time at I think 42 years old or something.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I think that's how old she was. Like I was 5. Yeah, she had me when she was 30. So she was 41 when she finally had the opportunity to go to a community college. You know, she didn't even have a high school diploma, and then like to take it so seriously, graduate top of her class, become a nurse in the emergency room, you know, and get a decent paycheck. And my dad was the same way, like was pushing a wheelbarrow around, trying to make a construction company, you know, and just kept at it until it became something. And so I've admired their progress. I've admired like how they stuck to these goals. They didn't you know, definitely didn't take any shortcuts or get anything handed to them, but they got there. And I think that's really inspiring. But I think what's even more inspiring was it really was the poor days. It was seeing how they operated before all that, before they had anything, and seeing how they could just make our whole childhood so magical, with the little that we had. And it's interesting because the progress part was the hard part for me. When they started making money and we left this little falling apart shack like in the boonies of Haiku, and they bought land for the first time, they in a subdivision, like so many changes,
Right.
that they were so proud of. But like I was miserable. It took me a while to transition, and my mom would always say like, "Oh, you left your heart in Haiku," and they knew that was tough for me, but at the same time I knew that they were very proud of their progress, and it's always been an interesting conversation, and it's neat to see like how their lives worked out and what they were able to experience, and I don't think they would change a thing, but it also ingrained something in me that makes me think about things differently. Like I keep running back, um, not necessarily to the poverty, but I keep running back to the values learned there and wanting to just really make sure that every step I take in my own life and now with my own family, that we're not going to lose the simple stuff, that we're not going to lose, like, I think that's why I let my life revolve so much around the inventory of food still,
Sure.
is
Yeah.
because it's that work. It takes work. I have to, like I said, if I have any social plans or events and it's just like, I have to cancel them because I owe it to what's in my fridge or what's in the Yeti coolers outside to like treat it like the gold that it is, and know that is nature that should be nurturing
Right.
somebody, and yet it's work to clean fish, to prepare things, to process, plants or animals, and I'm down to do it because to me there's something in that work that it's more than just feeling therapeutic, but it feels like a promise that I've made. It feels like a connection, back to the source where I came from. And there's just so many levels of it. Like it doesn't just feed me and feed my friends and feed my community, but it really does give my life meaning because it's that work and that connection that gives me this sense of belonging, that makes everything more meaningful. And then when you get to feed people this food that comes with so many stories, and the whole story of it, and you treated it so good, and and it's just right here from these mountains or this ocean, it is a connection, like feet on the ground connection to exactly where you are and your place in it. And I think that's something that I need in my life.
It makes a ton of sense. And I'd imagine too that experience, growing up and existing in different worlds with different experiences is probably something you folded into being a parent. I know that I have, in the last decade or so. It's like when you're growing up, your family is usually all you're like, oh, this is normal. And then you meet other families, or you have different experiences, and you go like, oh, right, okay, like, yeah, there were some good things and maybe some things I wouldn't do. And then I never thought about it so much until I became a father. And I'm like, okay, like what are the things I want to bring from that part of my life? What about this? Like, how do I make sure I give them everything good about me without downloading maybe some of the issues? It's just one of those ongoing things. And I'd imagine that, it provides such a different lens on probably everything you do, having a child.
Absolutely. And I don't think we'll ever like get it perfect.
No,
get
yeah,
it
definitely.
right,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
definitely. And when I think about my own parents, it's like what they did made absolute sense.
Totally,
They
yeah.
raised us the best they could with what they had. And then as soon as they had more, they wanted to give us more. And then their hopes and dreams for us is that then we'd be able to, to take that even further. So it kind of came as a shock to them when at 24 years old with a college degree, I'm like, I found what I love, and it's not this, it's spearfishing. And I think I scared the crap out of my dad. Like he just saw me just like pretty much running back to something he would do because he was poor and struggling, and then choosing that as like, no, this is it. Like, this is what I want in my life. And I'm sure that was a scary thing for him because he was so carefully trying to map out more opportunity for us than what they had. So it's funny. And then now being a mom, I definitely, I have the same dialogue in my head all the time about how I'm raising my son, and he might just want something totally different too. You know, we just
That's
don't
the
know.
risk. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. We're going to take a quick break to get a word in from our sponsors. And when we come back, we're going to dive into that pathway for you when you were younger and the many, many things that you got very good at. So we'll be right back. So we touched on this a little bit in the first segment. You talked about growing up in haiku and a sort of a rural upbringing in Maui, and then, transitioning into suburbia, more or less, for as far as suburbia goes in Hawaii. And, I'm interested because you mentioned going to school and getting a college degree. What was the degree in, and how did you, I guess before we get to the degree, my question is, how did you kind of find who you were before you found spearfishing, right? Because it's a pretty significant transition going from one space to another. And as you said, you weren't super happy with it at first. Like, what were the kind of things that leveled you out, I guess, as sort of a teenager before you went to school?
I mean, I feel like when I was a teenager, I loved cooking. I was the president of the food service club of Maui High. Like, I really did love it. I loved the ocean. Like, I loved canoe paddling. That was my main sport. That we were really, really dedicated to as teenagers. And I also I love bodyboarding. And so definitely, like, enjoyed the ocean, camping, nature, all those things even me out. But and friends, of course, just like a great group of friends during that adolescent time was just like so important. And so I went to college to pursue a culinary arts degree because that's what made the most sense. And
What
that was
school?
great.
What school did you go to?
I went to they call it like the Culinary Institute of the Pacific, but it's basically Kapiolani Community College.
Oh, cool.
Here on Oahu, and so I moved to Oahu to go to college, and that was a really great experience. I mean, I loved just being able to learn things that interested me. But after getting my degree, I think that was it. Like, when I got my degree, and I was only 21 when I got my degree, just about to turn 22. And then I just knew, like, okay, like, that's it. Like, the learning process, is over. And now you're signing up for the job you want to do for the rest of your life. That's how I was thinking of it. When I realized that, and then I started getting jobs in the restaurant industry, I think that's when it just really occurred to me that something was missing. And I just kept trying. Like, I felt like I was just kind of floating around in life, which maybe is a normal thing to do in your early 20s, but just really like not sure where I wanted to land. And I dabbled a lot in art. Like, I started taking so many art classes on the side after I got my culinary degree, because I was like, maybe culinary is not it. Maybe, it has to be something more creative. And so I dabbled in fine arts. But I was cooking in a restaurant and not feeling fulfilled from that, because the things that I loved about cooking, it was like the creativity, the creation, the spontaneity of working with different ingredients and making something wonderful, but not like making the same thing every single day that you really have no connection.
Well, maybe before you go into that, because I was curious about the culinary arts thing too. Just obviously, when we're all young, we've got kind of like an idea of what this might lead to career-wise, but as you grow older, you're like, oh, that was a mistake, or like, oh no, I was on the right path. I just had no idea about the rest of it. It's a little bit like an iceberg that way. When you were going to, school for the culinary arts, were you thinking, Michelin star chef. Like I want to work in these spaces and work, with that kind of the highest levels of food. And the reason I ask is because it does seem like everyone's become fascinated with food culture over the last decade. There's the Hell's Kitchen and the Great British Bake Off and, movies like The Menu and The Chef, like everything is around this kind of probably what was before like an impenetrable community of food preparation, and now everyone's kind of obsessed with it. I'm curious to know where your head was at as a young person going to school for it.
I think when I was in culinary school, I was fascinated by what I was learning. I was fascinated by learning all the the French classics or just the fundamentals of cooking and all of that, and I really enjoyed it. But where I saw myself going was the unclear part. I wasn't like, I definitely like imagine, would dabble in like letting myself imagine like opening up my own restaurant, but wasn't really sure if that was it for me, or becoming some Michelin star chef, but also wasn't sure if that would equal happiness. And so as I was pursuing this thing, which really felt like and was a completely worthy pursuit that I enjoyed, I secretly was hoping that some other creative dream career would just fall on my lap and change my course, because I had no idea what I really wanted to do. And I didn't have a clear vision of what it would look like in the restaurant industry. I did not have a clear vision of it. And so I knew it was like, for lack of better words, like the next best thing I could pursue would be this restaurant industry of some sort career. And so I did it, but I just kept hoping, I just kept knowing, as long as I'm moving forward and exploring something, the other thing, whatever it is, I was always waiting for it. Whatever that other thing is, it's gonna come for me. It's gonna fall in my lap, and then I can change course. But I just have to be doing something in the meantime. And that's why I think getting a degree was daunting to me, because I'm like, oh my gosh, like those years in college came and went, and nothing magically fell on my lap and changed my course of life. And now here I am with this degree, and it's time to go get a job. And somehow I don't feel super excited about that. And then I went and I gave that my best, and I really wasn't excited about any of the jobs that I got. And so it really was like this time of just searching, just kind of searching, like knowing that something in me didn't quite feel complete, but not knowing what it was that I needed to really feel content.
Do you still feel the same way now, or in the sense of you can get so involved in a thing, but part of you is still pulling it like, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? Or do you feel like it's maybe less pronounced as you've kind of like rounded out the corners of your personality and your interests? You're like, okay, I know these pieces. Maybe there's still space for that, but it's less of a like, I have to fill this whole vessel up with things now.
So I feel like that one day when I finally returned to spearfishing, when I finally realized this is going to be part of my life, it filled that void in me completely. Like it really did. I mean, it sounds so weird to say that, but it did. It filled that hole. It was like falling in love for the first time. It was just, I never knew life could feel so sweet and so satisfying. And I didn't change my career right away. I was still showing up at my 9-to-5 cooking job every day, but like a girl who's in love, like just with these fantasies, thinking about my last dive going through my head. It just made it all the much better. And so there's something about me reuniting with spearfishing that filled the void that that really completed me, and I feel like that hasn't been taken from me, and I since. And it's been I'm 42 now, so it's been a while, but I will say that, like you said, progress is never linear. And so of course that those voices always come up, like not in such a major way where I don't really feel like I'm just this lost soul floating around in the world anymore, like wondering where to land. I don't feel that, but there's always things, sometimes there's always things sometimes on a weekly basis where you're going down a path, whether it's a work project you really decided to dedicate yourself to, or whatever it is. But you're going down a path, and then you have to. I've become so much better at now navigating and listening to those voices because of that, because I can recognize it. I can recognize it when part of my soul says, yeah, this feels like progress, but is it really, I don't know if this is really
Right,
it,
yeah.
and so now it's like, I just I listen to that voice so much more, and it comes in these smaller circumstances or different situations. I feel complete as a whole, but it's always just like this compass. It's always this compass where you can feel complete as a whole, but it's gonna start to waver sometimes, and then you have to kind of take a turn, and it's gonna start to waver again. You never arrive. You never ever ever ever, in my opinion, arrive. Like, you arrive somewhere to some next level, and you might not ever go back down to where you came from again, but that level is going to be filled with all kinds of like tacking and navigation that you have to do to stay on course, or necessarily, or going off course to learn something. Like, it's all progress is not linear.
No,
I
I
just
think
keep saying that.
well, you're totally right.
It's always a work in progress.
Well, and I think the awesome thing about it too is like, I always think of this when you, and I guess I had to do it too, but like when kids apply to a college and they're like, they have to declare their major and it's very hard to change. And it's like, I didn't know what I was going to do at 17. Like, who knows what they're going to be at 17? That's insane to kind of get locked in on this trajectory without the flexibility to change moving forward. And I think you're totally right. Like, as you go through life, it's like, it's nice to have that piece of flexibility to always try to push and try new things, but you kind of round out like, okay, this is who I am and I understand that, but it makes a ton of sense. And, when you kind of fell in love with spearfishing again, since you did it when you were young with your father, you were an art school teacher for a little bit, or not art school, art teacher at school for a bit. And then you had to kind of make the leap to go, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to move into pursuing spearfishing full time. How did you live? Like, how did you pay the rent, when you're like, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to be a spearfisher.
Totally. Yeah. So basically, I was an art teacher, for an elementary school, and I think I had worked there for about 4 years. And so I taught the whole school. I watched my kindergartners become fifth graders.
That's cool.
And I just realized that, I knew all these kids since they were practically toddlers, and that I've been telling them, every single day that they have me, that they can do anything that they want if they practice and they apply themselves and all of this. And I realized that I wasn't completely applying myself for my dreams. So I did. I quit. I quit that job, and I decided that I was just going to do my own art, and paint my own paintings, and make a living off of being an artist. And that would give me the time and the freedom to go spearfishing. I didn't see spearfishing as a career option. Right. It was a passion. Right. So, but I figured that if I could make a living off of selling my paintings, and have the flexibility to go diving whenever the weather was good, that could be a good life. And I just remember, like, oh my gosh, like the looks of craziness I got when I put in my 2 weeks. And the principal of the school, she was my boss, and she's like, Kimi, if you quit this job, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to be an artist. I'm going to do paintings and sell my paintings. And she looked so concerned. And then she just said, Kimi, but really, what else will you do? And I was like, well, it's so funny you ask, because I'm also going to do spearfishing. And I really think that she thought I was having some sort of mental breakdown. But that's what I did. And it really, that was the biggest struggle of my life. And I had just like, when I really took that leap, it was also like I had just gotten out of this, relationship. And I remember like I remember saying, okay, maybe I'll move back home to Maui and take some time and figure things out. And it was my ex, wonderful guy, like still one of our best friends. But it was my ex who just like, he's the one that pushed me, and he just said like, he was about 6 years older than me, so he called me kiddo sometimes. He'd say, kiddo, like whatever you do, don't do that. Do not go back to Maui and move back in with your parents. And I was like, well, I'm scared. Like I have this big Rottweiler, and to find a place that's like pet friendly in Hawaii for like a single person, like
he's got to eat.
it's
Like there's
insane.
there's all sorts of stuff.
Exactly. Like it's insane. And he gave me the best pep talk, and he just said, like he said, you are the best first mate anybody could ever ask for. And he's like, if I put you on my boat, he's a fisherman, if I put you on anybody's boat, like they're going to be stoked because you're going to just contribute and be the best first mate. And he's like, but why do you think you're not happy in your life? Or why do you think you have to leave this relationship, or you're so confused? Because I was just in a confused area. And he's like, don't you get it? Like everything that's pulling you away from everything right now, like what it's telling you. And he's like, you're a great first mate, but you're not meant to be a first mate. You're meant to be a captain. And he's like, so don't go jump on your parents' boat and live under their roof. And don't go jump on some other dude's boat and live under their roof. He's like, you need to just sign a lease that you think you can't afford. And I promise you, you're going to figure it out. You're going to make it happen, because that's what you're meant to do. You're meant to be a captain. And like, that was like my little pep talk. And that's exactly what I did. I just, felt like I had no job, but I signed, this lease to rent this place, for a year. It was not cheap. And I tried to sell paintings, and the paintings weren't selling. And I really felt like it was time to go jump on somebody's boat or ask for help. But then I just got this idea to, instead of trying to sell these paintings for like hundreds or thousands of dollars that people weren't interested in, I started taking what I saw underwater, all those little beautiful fish that I grew up eating, and I started painting them instead of on a canvas on trucker hats. And I just painted them on trucker hats, and I sold the trucker hats for $25 each. And they sold, and I hustled. Like I turned into a one woman sweatshop, like staying up all night long, painting fish on trucker hats, posting them on Facebook, all this kind of stuff. But I somehow, like every month, made the rent, fed my dog, started growing a garden, started bringing home fish to subsidize it. And then I just realized, like, this is it. This is my struggle. This is the part of my parents' life that I love the most. So I need to love this part. And I did, and I loved it. And I loved that every single month I somehow was able to keep a roof over my head by painting these trucker hats. And I love that even though I was a one woman sweatshop, I could, when the weather was good, I could just drop everything and go diving. I love that going diving helped me save money by feeding me and all of this kind of things. And then before I knew it, I started getting better and better and better at it. And then I started getting offered money, and jobs and travel opportunities, like slowly, very, very trickle in slowly, but things that I would have never expected. I started to see the world first. I started to see the world because of my diving. My diving started getting me opportunities where people needed, whether it was in conservation, whether it was whatever, where people were willing to send me somewhere, to dive. And that just blew my mind. And a little bit later after that, that's when took a while before actual money started coming in. But the freedom and the experiences that came at first were enough to just make me realize, like, this is beyond my wildest dreams. Like, I didn't even think I could survive. And now I'm surviving and squeezing in what I love too. And then what I love just very, very gradually took over everything.
That is a damn good pep talk. I'm gonna have to get your ex's phone number after this. I'm gonna call him up and be like, hey, I need some help. It is amazing, and I mean, even I was gonna ask too, just specifically on, what makes a good spearfisher person. And how does like a spearfishing competition work? You mentioned that you were getting better and better. So obviously it's something that you put your 10,000 hours in, you start getting, returns on that investment of time and effort. But for our listeners who might not be familiar with it, like how does a competition work in spearfishing?
So the way that the national championships worked and a lot of other spearfishing championships is basically it was pretty cool. Like you go somewhere, you try to get there ahead of time if you can afford it. And so you try to get there ahead of time and you just scout. You just get to know the area. You just go there. You're not spearing anything. You're just studying the fish. You're understanding the waters. You're understanding the behaviors. And then on competition day, basically, most of those are kayak meets. So you get on your kayak. You're like in the middle of like 60 to 70 other dudes all around you. And then they blow this horn, and then you have 6 hours to paddle your heart out and go to all the spots you scouted. And it's a scavenger hunt, really. There's a list of fish that you are trying to get, and there's bag limits for everything. So you can only get 2 of these or whatever, and there's size limits for everything. And so you just go around and you scavenger hunt and try to get these fish. And the way it usually works is it's 1 point per fish. And so every different species, you're going to get a point alone for that. And then 1 point per pound. So size does matter to an extent, with a maximum of 15 pounds. And so the reason why, or 15 points, I should say. So 100-pound fish will be the same as a 15-pound fish.
Ah, interesting.
So you can't just shoot one giant fish and win everything.
And is that for like fairness reasons, or maybe even like, dare I say, like sustainability reasons, where it's like we don't want everyone
It's because I think they do that so that because luck is such a factor in all of this, but that takes some of the luck out. Right. Because if you're a really crappy spearfisher person and you don't even know what you're doing, but somehow a huge fish swims in front of you and then you become the national champion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, I know what you mean.
So if they make it with a cap of 15 points, then you can't just get lucky once and win something. You have to be able to apply the skill of the scavenger hunt. And in order to do that, you have to actually know what you're doing. And so that's why I think they do it like that.
Makes sense. And geez, yeah, it's so cool. And I mean, in a way, to draw back to what we normally talk about, the luck factor often has to do with, surfing as well. Like you can, at the end of the day, the ocean's kind of in charge. Like if it sends you the waves, then you're in business. And if not, you gotta work a little harder than everyone else. You mentioned that the career kind of picked up steam gradually, but as it stands today, you've got a number of really high profile sponsorships and supporters, whether it's Patagonia or Traeger grills, Olukai, Juneshine, and probably one that fits so well with everything you do is someone like Yeti. Tell us a little bit about how that partnership kind of came to be and what you kind of work on with them, year in and year out.
Well, with Yeti, I mean, as soon as Yeti kind of made their presence as a company, I knew I wanted to be with them. Like I've never pursued a sponsorship. They've always come to me, and that's just the way I was used to doing it. I didn't really ever go sell myself or put myself out there. I just kind of waited to see what came in and then responded to it. But Yeti was like the one exception where I was just like, I love them and I belong with this company. Like it just felt so fitting. Like not only because it's like, oh, they make coolers that I need to keep my fish cold, but just the quality product, the true grit, the way they embrace the wild, like everything about the realness that they represented. I don't even know the authenticity of that they represented really inspired me. And so they were the one company where I was just like, I want to be with them. And I think it was, and I mentioned that at a sales meeting I had at Patagonia, and one of the head marketing guys, Corey over there, Corey Simpson, he's like, well, you should absolutely be with them. And he's like, I'll just send an email to them and tell them that you want to be with them. And so he made the connection, and then Yeti contacted me, and we just started a conversation, and it's been, gosh, I don't even know. It's probably been 6 or 7 years now of working together. But yeah, they've been awesome. And the team that they choose is such a big part of it, is that we're all legitimately like real life friends, and just true blues. I what I like about them is that they don't just like, they're not just looking for people with huge social media followings or anything like that. Like they're looking for the true blues, and the way that they are able to honor that, that's what makes me feel the most connection, I think, to the brand.
It's interesting, and I think there's a lot of parallels with one of your other supporters in Patagonia. Living up in Oxnard, I'm colleagues with a few people that work there, and they were talking about those ambassador programs, which sponsorship programs, and they're like, no, we don't do the $10 million a year sponsorship for the person that's like a specialist in this one thing. It's usually like, here's the chemistry teacher from Utah that is a chemistry teacher because they love to go climbing, and they're like a world-class climber. Like it's, you said, it's like real people that are kind of relatable to everybody because everyone's got a job, but not everyone realizes, oh, I have a job and I have to pay rent or I have to pay the mortgage. I got to take care of these things. Oh, and I can do this other thing that like might be my passion and kind of, feed my soul in a way, which is really, really cool. And I'd imagine whether it's Patagonia or Yeti, like those are products that whether you were with them or not, you'd be using every week. Like, I'd imagine, especially in food preparation or diving, you probably just have the entire Yeti catalog in your truck or something.
Absolutely. And absolutely. And I think that exactly is what makes it work so well. Because if it wasn't a product that I use, and when it comes to these brands, it's like every single day, I literally honestly do depend on these products. And I think that if it wasn't, it would just suck my soul away too much. That's when the voices in my head would start saying like, you're not happy. If I had to pretend and try to like put up this front of selling myself, using something or whatever all the time that wasn't true, I know how much that would eat away at me and make me miserable. And I think that's what makes these ones just so easy, like so seamless and easy, because like you said, whether the cameras are on or off, like that's really what I'm doing and that's really what I'm using. And it's a very, very fitting, like true thing. And that's what makes it work.
What's your go-to? Is it, like the Tundra cooler on the boat, or, a coffee mug or a canteen? What do you think gets the most use in your day-to-day?
I would say both of those for sure, but probably the hoppers, the little soft coolers that I can just like throw over my shoulder and go with. It's tough, but I would say that would probably be my favorite and my most depended upon product, because that's just every day. That's like whether I'm gonna go diving and bring like something to eat or drink on the boat, or whether I'm just gonna go 3-pronging for a little fish that'll all fit in there. or just take my son to the beach, or like I said, or give food away to my community. It's like those are the ones that I think I probably depend on the most.
That makes a ton of sense. And, you know, shifting gears a little bit, I mean, you accomplish so much as a competitor in a pretty short span of time, but it does sound like it didn't hold your attention for very long. Like it wasn't like you were a multi-decade competitor in spearfishing. It sounds like you had other interests, after a couple of years of it. Well, can you walk us through that internal conversation you had with yourself to kind of step away from full-time competition and say, I'm going to pursue these other things?
Yeah, I mean, that was just, I guess, again, that was something where I went down this path of competing. I immediately, like, one of the first competitions I did was the national championships that I won, and then went on to do other competitions, and it was great, really great at first because, oh my gosh, I mean, because it was wonderful because I set a goal. Like I said, I was never really the person who was really good at setting goals or visualizing what I wanted for the future. But when I set my goal on doing the national championships, I was setting my goal on winning it. And when that actually came true, it was mind blowing. It was just like, it felt like all the stars had lined up and everything just came together. And the gratitude I felt for everyone that helped me get there was the biggest buzz of my life. And then to have that give me the recognition of, a public recognition where people were stoked on it and supported me. And then, more hats and paintings started selling. And it just felt like things are really, really going to work out because of this. I kept going with that and I kept competing, but it lost its magic really quickly to me. Really, really, really quickly. I think about after a year and a half, I was back to that place of that inner voice just being like, this doesn't feel good anymore. This doesn't feel good. And I think when I really explored the fundamental essence of that, it was just because that's not what diving was for me. That's not what spearfishing ever was. When I went back to 5-year-old Kimi and what made me happy, it was going out in the ocean to have this like beautiful, unreal experience and come home with food. And what I didn't like so basically there's nothing wrong with competition. Like everything, it was great. It was great for me, but it changed my mindset it changed my mindset to a point where it was hard. It was hard because all I thought about was competing. All I thought about were points. Right. All I thought about was whether or not I was going to win again and again and again. And if I didn't, I felt like I failed. And more than that, I just, what I did not like is that when it came to my own personal time in the ocean, which is something that gave me everything, something that healed me and my crazy, noisy brain. Every single time I go in the water, I love that my brain goes quiet. I love that that's the first time and the only thing really that keeps me so present in the moment that it's like the most pure form of just like meditation and self and love and everything coming together, because my mind goes quiet and I'm not thinking about anything else except what I'm doing and what's in front of me. And that, even when I just say it right now, like my body craves it. Like to be that present where you're not thinking about anything else except what you're doing is like the most ultimate form of love and flow that I've ever felt, and it makes me thrive. And the thing about competition is that it was taking that away from me. I wasn't able to go in the ocean without thinking about points, without thinking about winning. And even if I just went out with a 3-prong just to get dinner that night, just looking at fish and being like calculating how many points would that fish be, how many points would this fish be, that's what you needed to do in order to be a winner. Like that's what you needed to operate at such a highly competitive mindset, which was really great for me for a short period of time, but ultimately started to feel soul sucking and take away from the magic of it. And then I just realized that I was interested in other things. Like it was really cool to see how I could compare to fellow divers and to put all this energy in something and achieve a goal. But I didn't want to just keep pressing that button and doing that. I was so interested in cooking, and I was so interested in conservation, which at the time, that was like back in 2008, 2009, it wasn't this huge buzzword that
Sure.
it is now.
Yeah.
In fact, it was almost like a bad word. Like people just were like thought you were a weirdo if you were like talking about eco-friendly or sustain. People didn't even. I don't even think sustainability was like a buzzword back then. But all I knew is the ocean gave me so much, and that I wanted to really learn how to give back, how to take care, how to be responsible, how to help solve some problems, and so there are just these other things that were felt so much more important to me. But it was a really hard thing to walk away from because, again, I feel like it would make more sense to do that today than it did back then. And so to leave something so early on when that was clearly what gave you like the start of your career and gave you everything that you had and gave you this great life. And then to walk away from that and just say, like, I want to just spearfish for food and learn about conservation, felt like I was going to just like throw away everything. Like it really did. But I was willing to do that if it meant I could have that feeling back.
Right. I want to dive a little bit more into this. We're going to take another quick break to get a word in from our sponsors, and we're going to be right back. It was really interesting just before the break to hear you talk about, competition, and you're like, competition's good, but it did sound similar to what I think happens to all of us, when we're younger or even when we're older, and something that we're interested in becomes our identity, and it's like, and often, like, I mean, I work for the World Surf League, like we are a platform for surfing competition. And I always think about it like, hey, if the platform is creating the conditions to like really push the boundaries of what people can do in the water, that's our business. Like if we're a platform for kind of stewarding the best surfing on the planet, we're doing the right job. Now, that doesn't always feel like the case. And for sure, like some of the competitors in our sport are probably so specialized to the point where, when they're competing, they're not actually doing the thing that they fell in love with to begin. And I'm sure that's similar with almost any sport. But it does sound like when it comes to you, there were elements at every step of the way that even if you went, okay, I'm moving on from that, you took little pieces, whether it was, I went to culinary school, or I taught art, or I was a competitive spearfisher person. And, you're moving through life, and you're not just full stop abandoning everything you did before, but you're pulling kind of the pieces along the way and getting back to what makes you you. And it feels like that was a natural fit when you started kind of moving into becoming this amazing storyteller. And the one I wanted to pick your brain about a little bit was at 7 months pregnant, you took a trip to the island of Jeju in South Korea to meet with the Haenyeo, which was a group of free diving and fishing women who are often regarded as Korea's first working mothers, and with a culture dating back kind of centuries. So tell me a little bit about this transition out of the competitive part of your career, but kind of into this, I don't know what I'd call it, like cultural connector, storyteller. And I'd imagine that through that experience, you're not only feeding other people these stories, but you're kind of feeding yourself as well.
Absolutely. 100%. And I do think that it's crazy how even when I talk back about the days of just not knowing and floating around, I just think that, or even, walking away from competition, like none of those things are like, oh, I took a wrong turn, and I regret it. Like all of those things were were defining my preferences, and every single one of them like has given me tools and and skills and things that that I just are so integrated in my life right now. And it's really neat to see like, oh, it's not that, you know, you took a wrong turn and had to go back and choose a different path, but it's more of such a circular thing where where it all comes together and becomes this fusion that you can use towards whatever it is that you're really interested in now. And so the storytelling and all of that, like it did happen because one thing competition taught me is that I love to travel. Like I love it. I love to go somewhere and see a place, and it gave me that. It gave me, you know, this access to the world that I never had before, and I knew that I loved that. I just knew I wanted to spend more time there. I wanted to not just go there and compete. I wanted to go there and get to know the food and the locals, and then talk to them about issues that are going on in the oceans, and understand things more from a global perspective. And and so that's what I ended up doing after competition, was just like realizing like this is the part I really like about it. So I want to do this, but I want to put my own, you know, I want to also learn about these things. And then as I learned about them, it became felt very, 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 very important to share this knowledge. And a lot of the things, you know, I was learning about were just we're answering questions of why the ocean I'm diving in now looks different from the ocean my 5-year-old eyes remember. And I felt like that was very important, you know, information to share and to get out there. And so that's kind of how like the storytelling like part of me started to grow. Is I just started sharing what I was learning from other people. And then that ended up like I said, I thought I was going to lose everything
Right.
from like being able to have a career underwater. I thought the only way to get that was to only compete. But it just opened another door for me, which was the stories from underwater and sharing these stories. And then that ended up being something that became one of the biggest parts of my career. And so through like working with with great brands or scientists or nonprofits, like I was able to really go be the eyes of the underwater world and share these stories. And that's what I did for a great number of years. A lot of times just adventure based, a lot of time conservation based, call to actions, like anything, you know, that interested me. That's what I would do. And then I got pregnant, um and I had been at that time like traveling like crazy. I was probably gone more than I was
Right.
home, and always like, you know, off to amazing places, doing amazing things. It was very meaningful work. It felt great. But when I became pregnant, everything just stopped. I just realized like I don't want to be traveling the world right now. Like I want to be home. I want to grow some roots. I want to create a foundation, and I want to have this baby. And then my friend Nicole, who's one of my favorite directors to work with, Nicole Gormley, she called me up and she's just like, okay, I know you don't want to do any more storytelling. I know you don't want to do any more projects this year. Like I get it. Like you don't want to travel and you don't want to go make a film. And she said, I just have to ask. Like not even one. Like if there was just one idea that you had that you actually would want to do right now, you know, what would it be? And it was like I didn't even blink. I said, there's absolutely one thing I would say yes to. And it's going to Korea, and it's meeting the Haenyeo. The Haenyeo are these like grandma free divers who've been, you know, sustaining their community and their families through collecting shellfish underwater and whatnot for centuries. And I would like to go meet them and go dive with them and really just go be with them now, like while I'm pregnant. And and she just took that and ran with it. And so she put together a treatment Patagonia greenlit it, and within 2 weeks from that conversation, we were packing our bags. I was 7 months pregnant, and going to Korea to do that. And a big part of that, honestly, one of the biggest reasons why was much more personal than anything. Number one, they've been my heroes for a long time, because it's just so neat when you can connect with something that inspires you. And the fact that there are these like badass women divers out there long before I came along, really gave my eyes just something to sink into. You know, you need to see. So many times it's so much easier to accomplish something when you can see it, you know. And even in my like early days of spearfishing, like I would often like take spearfishing magazines and cut my face out and put it on the body of some dude holding a big fish, just to make me believe in myself, and put it over my bed. But to actually see like these women who've been doing it forever, that was amazing. And also, when I got pregnant, I went freediving throughout my whole pregnancy, and there wasn't a lot of answers about whether that's okay or not.
Right.
You know, like when I asked the doctors, they're like, "Oh yeah, it's totally fine. Snorkeling, this and that." I'm like, "Well, yeah, but it's kind of extreme snorkeling what I do." You know, but first they're like, "Oh no scuba, no scuba if you're pregnant." I'm like, "No, it's not scuba. It's like I hold my breath, I go down, shoot the fish," and they're like, "Oh yeah, snorkeling, like it's fine." I'm like, "Okay, even if I'm diving 100 feet," and then their eyes would like pop out of their head.
We don't get that
and
question very often.
They don't, and they didn't have the answers. And I really had to look within and just know that I felt the healthiest. I felt at my best. My body felt at my best when I was diving. I definitely wasn't going 100 feet. You know, I cut that in half, and I tried to be as conservative as I could. And I just tried to really tune into my body, tune into my baby, and listen to my baby. But social media, being a public person, like when people would see that I was diving pregnant, some of the comments that came in of like how I'm hurting my baby, how I'm like, you know, the pressure isn't good for the baby to go that deep. All these experts, right?
Of course,
like all these stuff.
I know.
I'm depriving my baby of all of these things, and that was when I really realized, because before those types of comments, negative comments, never really got to me. I had developed such thick skin.
Right.
I'm so used to people getting mad at me for killing animals and stuff that I just really like I'm able to know what my values are and stand behind them. And for the first time in my life, I realized like it was harder for me because it's not just about me and my choices. It's about Buddy. Yeah. It's about this baby in my belly. And then I realized that to become a mother for me is to worry. Yeah. Like you worry about everything, like because it's somebody else, you know, and that you're in charge of. And so when those would get to me, I would just go down rabbit holes of researching the Henyo and just read books on them, look at articles, look at old photos. And to see, I found photos of pregnant Henyo diving. I found articles about how they would dive during their whole pregnancy. And so I would just like keep these articles and photos in my phone, and I would like have to visually look at it to just say, trust yourself, Kimi, trust yourself. But so that was like the secret reason of why I needed to just go be with them, you know? And I went to share their story, to share who these women are, and to celebrate all that they do. But I also went, and we didn't make the film about this, I also went just to really like know that everything was going to be okay. And they didn't even blink. I mean, the only thing they did was like help me get my fins on because it was hard for me to bend over my belly. But they just were like, absolutely, like get in the water, let's go. You know, like we've been doing this forever. Like, and it was just amazing. Like that's one of my favorite films and trips to date, you know.
I love that story so much. I mean, it's just the social media thing. It's like for all the good it's done, and I guess someone can explain exactly what that is because I'm unclear. It's created this weird paradigm where, you know, I always say like, you know, accessed information is not the same thing as earned information. And like social media and the information age just kind of eradicated humility. You never hear someone say, "Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know," because everyone's got a supercomputer in their pocket and everyone's an expert. It's such a nightmare. Anyway, that's a tangent. That's my rant on social media for the podcast. If before we had this conversation, if we were out having coffee and catching up, and I asked you in 2023, well, Kimi, like, what would you say your job is? How would you explain it to someone who'd never met you or heard about you? What would you say you do?
I would I would say, gosh, I never know how to answer this. I usually just say that my job is being a spearfisher woman, but that always makes people think that I sell fish for a living, which I don't. But I would say that my actual job is creating conversations and stories and content that connects us to the ocean and to food and to nature and into fun ways of how to put that nature into our bodies with making meals. And how to make that and just how to bring that as meaning into our life. But again, that's a really weird job description. Yeah, I really don't know how I would describe it.
I mean, but just getting to know you over the course of the last hour and a half, like it doesn't sound odd. Like it's essentially what we've been talking about, when we all start out, we're kind of this empty vessel and we're trying to figure out what we are. And if we kind of, if we're honest about it and we kind of do the right by ourselves, maybe we try something, maybe we move on from it, but we bring little pieces, along the way. And it does sound like in 2023, you sit at the nexus of all these things, whether it's spearfishing, the culinary arts, like art, business, storytelling, and, whether it's your YouTube channel or being an ambassador for all these brands, like that does sound like you've kind of filled into who you were always supposed to be, and obviously, as we said, like there's still space left to explore and to push and evolve, of course, but it's a very cool story of all these different strands kind of creating a tapestry that makes a lot of sense when you talk about it.
That's one thing I really find interesting, because I remember like when I was a kid, and I feel like every other kid that I knew, like if you were to ask us, what we wanted to be, and we're like 4 or 5 years old or whatever, I remember just giving answers like that were so long. I would just say like, "Oh, I want to be a veterinarian, rock star, singer, dancer, artist," and then the kid next to me would be like, "I want to be a fireman, astronaut, this, that, that," and it's like, and that's how we would answer the question. And then it's like you get older and you realize, oh gosh, you absolutely can't do that. Like you can't choose all of those, and you have to just choose one and focus in. And I feel like that's how we're just like trained, and that's what we end up doing. And so it kind of like, I mean, it makes me really happy now when I'm asked like, what do you do, or what is your job, and even like, though I laugh when you gave me that whole big introduction.
This is true though.
It's I laugh because it's true, and it sounds kind of crazy and all over the place, but I guess I always wanted to have like a multifaceted job description, and I just love that you don't have to, that they can all marry together. Like for a while I thought like, oh yeah, I chose culinary arts and gave that up. I gave that up to pursue spearfishing, and I'm really stoked with where I'm going now. And now I realize like, no way, you didn't give it up at all. Like that was the absolute building blocks for for it. And there's nothing that can go better with harvesting and spearfishing than having the background in how to cook it. And then when it comes to like all the storytelling or filmmaking or YouTube's, it's like that's just another extension of it. That's just another extension of this love language of it all. And I can't imagine just choosing one because it wouldn't be complete, you know?
I love it. I said when I was a kid, I wanted to be an intergalactic bounty hunter before being sent to the principal's office. But yeah, podcast hobbyist is probably pretty close to intergalactic bounty hunter. I probably think, you know, for listeners who want to find out more about you and follow what's going on in your life, like where do you recommend they check out? Is there a website or YouTube, or what should people check out if they listen to this and they're like, oh, I want more Kimi Werner?
I would say, Instagram, I'm Kimi Swimmy, KIMI_SWIMMY. And then YouTube, I'm Kimi Werner on YouTube, and there's all kinds of just fun cooking and diving videos on there. And we definitely are creating more and have more in the works right now. So that's a good one. And yeah, my website is KimiWerner.com.
Love it. Well, on the topic of Instagram, we did put out a feeler to followers at the Lineup Pod and got a ton of questions for you, but we've narrowed those down to 3. The first question is from @DAV1DKAR3sin. I think that's David Carson, but I see it spelled 100 different ways on Instagram. Who asks, in your experience with ocean and aquatic life, do you feel that sharks are misconstrued? I suppose they mean in the media, mainstream media.
I'm sure they are. It's hard for me to really have a gauge on that because I feel like the media that I'm most flooded with are, I feel like in today's modern world, shark conservation is so trending right now that,
right. Yeah.
that like that's the media I'm really seeing is just like, sharks are important, sharks are great, like don't fear them, come learn about them.
Right.
That's what I get flooded with is just is everybody wanting to, learn more about sharks or go swim with sharks or, all that kind of stuff. And so, so I feel like there's a lot of information out there, constantly circulating that does not put sharks in a bad guy spotlight.
It's probably gotten so much better since, 1976 or 80, whenever it was, when Jaws came out, and that was kind of the singular piece of content that everyone went, oh my God. I mean, I'll ask a follow-up question just relatedly. Have you ever had an incident where you've been in the water with sharks and you've been a bit scared yourself?
Have I ever had an incident where I've been scared?
Yeah. Yeah.
I get scared all the time. Yeah. Everything from getting caught in currents that I just couldn't possibly swim against, and having to really contemplate what to do, to being approached by a 17-foot great white shark and and having a complete beautiful interaction with that animal, like completely special and beautiful and wonderful, but in those 3 seconds prior to our beautiful interaction, when you just see a head coming at you, it's scary. I think that there's moments all the time where I get scared. Gosh, just the other day, my friend Nicole, the same director who made Lessons from Jeju, we were out on our Sea-Doo, and she accidentally got the anchor line sucked up in the prop, and we were adrift, and our little dive knives wouldn't fit in there to cut it free. And I knew I could always call for a rescue, but there's always moments of I found the bigger knife and we got it. But but there's always moments of just fear and stress. And I mean, I think that's what keeps me coming back to the ocean.
Sure.
It is like that, those moments you can't become complacent and you can't panic. Like, I get scared all the time, but I really try not to panic. I try so hard to take whatever fear I'm feeling and know that it's a tool, whatever stress is going through my body, and know that those surges are sent to me to do something more productive with them than panic. And so when I feel fear, it becomes this indicator to become calm and to respond, to become calm, to assess the situation, and then to respond to it. And I feel like that's the opposite of panicking. But yeah, but fear is a real thing for me, definitely.
Second question is from @icy_PT, who asks, what's the one thing you wish you'd learned sooner in life?
Ooh, what a great deep question. I love it. I love it. I love it. What is the one thing I wish I learned sooner in life? I think how to say no. Maybe would be what I wish I learned sooner in life, is knowing that, is how to listen to that inner voice that I've been talking about on this whole thing. The one that tells you like, oh, I know this all looks good, or looks like success, or feels like the right thing to do, or feels like the polite thing to do,
Right.
or or whatever it is. So I think I'm supposed to do it because of A, B, and C telling me that I should probably do it. I think I'm supposed to do it. But when I have that inner voice saying, yeah, I don't really want to do it, like, it doesn't really feel good to do this anymore. Learning to get comfortable with listening to that voice, and find a way, no matter how uncomfortable, to say, I think I'm going to pass and I'm going to do something else. I think learning that sooner in life would have been the one thing.
That's a great one. The third question that we pulled from the Instagram community is from @KittyKendall, who asks, do you have any advice for someone interested in learning to spearfish?
My main advice would be go slow. Just go so slow. Like, don't. I know I tell this story about how I was 24 years old and I got a spear and I swam out by myself, all this kind of stuff. But I also have to put into context that that was after having years of tagging along with my dad and not even touching a spear. Right. That was after, even if I was little, those years still count. That was after having years of doing nothing but swimming, like nothing else, but just swimming and keeping up and watching and paying attention. And then years of cleaning fish and helping with that back end part of it. And then years of thinking about it, but basically, so I don't mean to make it sound like, oh, it's just like easy, quick thing. Go get a spear and swim out and find your reef and come home with 5 fish and feel like the queen of the world. It's not. It's more like baby steps. So my husband is from Minnesota, and when we met on set and fell in love, and he was a snowboarding cinematographer. So when we decided to be together, he moved to Hawaii, and I taught him how to free dive and spearfish, and it was a very Mr. Miyagi, like very, very slow steps, where at first all I would do was make him swim Waimea Bay with me every day. We're swimming. And then it was like, okay, I talked him through some drops, some dives, and going down and clearing your ears and whatnot. And I remember, like, after a few months into it, he's like, but Kimmy, when are you going to teach me to spearfish? And I'm like, I am teaching you to spearfish. And then after that, I took him to Sharks Cove which is a marine conservation area.
Yep.
So he did not have a spear in his hand. And I took him swimming around, and I sent him down to the bottom, asked him to give me the English and Hawaiian names of every single fish he could identify. Asked him to tell me which ones were big enough to spear, all of these things. And then just baby steps until he actually ever had like a spear gun in his hand. And I think that's why he's such a good freediver and spearfisherman now. But I know not everyone has a mentor in their pocket who can do this all for them. So I would just say, when I say go slow, I just mean get comfortable. Like if you can just snorkel and enjoy what you're looking at, stretch that out as long as you can. Don't be so excited to skip those steps. That's an important step. Then go get a fish identification book to your local area and make a game out of it. Like, read the book. I don't care how dorky it sounds. I did it. And like, look for the pictures of the fish and see what you can go out and see, and get down and get to know your environment, get to spend time there, get to know like this ecosystem. And then when you are, and you do feel like you are ready to start spearing fish, I personally like to start with a 3-prong, not even a trigger mechanism thing, something that makes you have to get so much closer to your prey. And it is important to find a partner. I do have to say that that's the only safe way to dive, is to find a partner. And so I think there's all types of like online forums now, and ways that you can reach out and find other spearfishers in your community. But having a buddy that can watch your back is really important.
That's a great answer. Well, thanks to everyone who wrote in at the lineup pod. It is now time for our final segment. It's time for the lightning round. These are 10 questions. We ask them every episode. I'm going to tweak yours slightly for Spearfishing Lens, but answer as quickly as you can.
Okay.
If you could only have one piece of equipment to spearfish with for the rest of your life, a pole spear, a Hawaiian sling, or a spear gun, which would you choose?
Oh my gosh. Oh, sorry, that's not fast. A spear gun, but I would so miss my 3-prong.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Burrito or pizza?
Oh, pizza. They're both good.
Last book you read?
Think Like a Monk.
Favorite documentary you've seen?
The Anthony Bourdain one was quite interesting.
What is one, we'll say, spearfishing location you never have to go back to?
I can't. I sorry. There's none that I would not want to go back to.
Totally fair. If you only got to spearfish at one location for the rest of your life, where would it be?
Can't tell you that.
Okay, but you have one. That's what matters, right? You got one.
Somewhere in Hawaii.
Okay, good. Best person to go fishing with?
My husband.
Worst person to go fishing with?
sometimes Buddy, my son.
That's cool. He goes though. That's great.
And he's the best, but he's also the worst. He's only 3, so it's okay.
We're speaking the same language.
Down.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Last one. Finish this sentence. I will next achieve a state of happiness by.
Creating a space in my home that makes me feel happy and proud. I'm just renovating right now.
I appreciate it. Kimi, Werner, thank you so much for coming on the lineup. It's been a true pleasure to talk to you for the last couple hours. Appreciate everything you're doing. And yeah, I hope everyone that listens to this checks you out, as I will. Appreciate everything you're teaching us.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the conversation, Dave. Thank you for having me.